Hello, I'm Alexis and this is Vilma. Can you tell
Hi.
us your name?
Sure. My name is Tom Trammell. I'm a resident here in Venice. I'm a co-owner of a investment advisory firm. I'm also involved in a bunch of boards in town. I'm on the Student Leadership Academy board. I'm on the board of the Rotary Futures. I'm also the Kiwanis Club's perpetual treasurer, and I'm also the Kiwanis advisor to the Key Club at Venice High School, below these that past 23 years. But once upon a time, when my hair was darker and my heart was lighter, I was a captain of Marines, and I spent time, a year and a half, in Vietnam.
Vietnam. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted. Once upon a time, I wanted to be in the Air Force. I was, back in 1961, and still am, a member of the Civil Air Patrol. But the Air Force, you couldn't attach a bayonet to an airplane, so it sort of lost some of its attraction. I went to my first year of college at Marion Institute, which is a small military school up in Alabama. I was not particularly impressed with the Army instructional staff, and then a Marine recruiter came, and he was 47 feet tall and had broad shoulders like Paul Bunyan, and I wanted to be like him. Now, my dad was also in the Marine Corps. He was a fighter pilot, World War II, Korea, career individual, um, and the Marine Corps was always in my blood, as was the military in general. So I had a chance to sign up in a platoon leader class. It was a 2 sessions of 6 weeks each, after my freshman and after my junior years in college. Completing those two successfully, I would get a commission in the Marine Corps. I would then go to Quantico for a between 7 to 5.5 months training session on teaching us how to be an officer in the Marine Corps, and that is the process I proceeded to follow. I graduated from University of Florida in 1968. I then went to Quantico at the basic school. I had been commissioned, and I spent a little under 6 months up there, whereupon everyone that was an infantry officer, myself included, including one of my classmates named Ollie North, who you may be familiar with, we all packed off and went to Vietnam.
So you were in college when you enlisted.
That is correct.
So you had already, you weren't like a senior
No.
out of high school and like
No,
nowadays that
I was always
they go.
oriented towards the military.
Okay, so you had that mindset even in college that you most likely would have gone to any type of military.
That is correct. It was
Yes.
only my great fortune that we actually had a war going on at the time that I went on active duty.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was an interesting experience. Certainly my comrades in Civil Air Patrol were all equally nutcases like myself, and all of us were oriented towards the military. Understand that this day and age, back in the 50s when we were growing up, the early 60s, certainly in Civil Air Patrol, the Strategic Air Command was the backbone of the national defense against the evil communists and their advancing. The nobility and the attraction of the military was very strong in that generation. Indeed, I had a good number of friends and acquaintances in Civil Air Patrol who all wound up going into the more radical branches, either warrant officer, flight, helicopter pilots, jet pilots, special forces, Marine Corps, and indeed the war chewed some significant holes in those ranks. I've got pictures, and there are half a dozen guys, and 2 of them never came back. There's an old Don Wilson joke from the returning Vietnam veteran. Some of me is coming home, and some of me is not. Some will eat mom's apple pie, and some stay here to rot. It's called the poem of the double amputee.
The poem of the double amputee?
Yes.
That's the title of the poem?
Such is my recollection. I do like poetry. It was interesting when we went to Vietnam. The announcements, we had a double class, so there were like 380 graduating second lieutenants in the Marine Corps from the basic school at that time, and the instructor said, other than those of you that are going to flight training or secondary schools, like a supply officer, for instance, or an administrative officer, the rest of you are all going to Vietnam immediately, and everyone erupted into cheers. And then he said, those of you going to subsidiary schools will finish those schools and then go to Vietnam. And then there was more cheering. A spirited crowd, good people, pretty much. Perhaps not mentally sane, but good people.
Where did you have any training or boot camp experience beforehand?
Yes,
going to
I
work?
had the 2 summers of 6 weeks each, both of them at Quantico.
Where is that?
In Virginia.
In Virginia. Oh, okay.
And during those 6 weeks times 2, it was very much a training experience. The intent was to winnow through the ranks and invite to depart those people who did not have the appropriate mindset or team attitude that was expected of an officer in the Marine Corps. Indeed, one of the casualties of the war for me personally was a sense of sympathy. I remember one of the forced marches we were on, one of the fellows tended to be a complainer, and he said, oh, I can't do it, I can't do it. And they were aggressive marches. You carried a lot of gear and you moved very fast, and there was some rough terrain. And I remember he stumbled in the road and fell down, and he was crying. And the people that followed him stepped on him as much as over him. Because we did not want someone like that standing next to us when times were difficult. And indeed, he departed voluntarily, to our satisfaction.
Were you friends with him, or you just knew him as a...
I knew him. He was one of the 80 people in our starting company, and we probably winnowed down probably 25% of that. The second summer it was a more hardened group, but indeed some of the guys came back and said, well, I remember this from a year or 2 ago, and it was lousy then, and it's lousy now, and they also departed to do more productive things with their lives.
At boot camp, did you have a choice to leave once you were there, or...?
The Marine Corps PLC program was designed for college students, and it's strictly a volunteer program.
Oh, it is.
Indeed, at any point in time, a person could drop on request and depart and not come back.
Did you ever think of dropping out?
No, I thought it was great.
You got a kick out of it, didn't you?
I got a kick out of it. And indeed, I consider myself well-read and well familiar with the military, even when I was in high school. The Civil Air Patrol experience, as well as aggressive reading on my part, so there were not surprises that came up.
So you weren't really surprised at anything you received at the boot camp. You pretty much expected.
Neither boot camp. Well, you use the term boot camp, which for the Marine Corps typically means Parris Island or San Diego, which is enlisted training.
Oh, okay.
Quantico is strictly for the officers. It would not be referred to as boot camp. It would be referred to properly as a basic training.
Oh, okay,
or basic training for officers. You could qualify it as such. But no, both the training experience nor the Vietnam experience did I encounter things that were a cultural shock for me.
I'm sorry. I just would expect that even during the war you would get something like as a surprise, but apparently in your case you already had that.
Well, I got surprised.
Yeah, but.
But it was not a culture shock. Oh, there's a lady and she's peeing on the side of the road. Well, she has to pee somewhere, and there's not a lot of other latrine facilities available to her, and that's what people do in third world countries. Whereas I remember distinctly one of the other young gentlemen who saw the same thing said, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" And he's pointing outside the truck. I thought that was crude, ungentlemanly, and disturbingly shallow understanding for an individual that was one of my peers in the officer ranks. You know, what do you expect in a war-torn country like this? Indeed, if you're looking for some cultural exposure to that, closer to your own years, there's a film out there, Between Heaven and Earth.